Ladies, room back here.
Keep looking, you can see a sign that says key.
Of the Destroyer Escort Sailors Association Auxiliary, Mary Klingel. Please welcome the program chairman for the Destroyer Escort dedication, Mr. John P. Cosgrove. Please welcome the president of the Destroyer Escort Sailors Association, Mr. Sam Saylor. Please welcome your Master of Ceremonies for today's event, Mr. James H. Boren. Please welcome a former Destroyer Escort Commander, Vice Admiral Samuel L. Grady, retired. And ladies and gentlemen, as our most honored guest this morning, please welcome the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral David E. Jeremiah.
Ready?
allegiance, please welcome Vice Admiral Samuel Gravely. Admiral Gravely became the first Black American to command the U.S. naval warship, the USS Flagout BER 324, in 1962. In 1971, he was selected for flag rank, becoming the first Black American admiral. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Gravely. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The official and most widely known symbol of a nation is its flag. In the United States of America, our symbol is the Stars and Stripes. For 2 centuries now, the Stars and Stripes have flown over these United States in peace, in war, and in good times as well as bad. The flag means many things to many people. To Francis Scott Key, the sight of the Stars and Stripes still flying over Fort McHenry at first light symbolized victory of the Americans over the attacking British forces. To Robert Peary, planting a piece of the flag in a snow cave at the North Pole symbolized his conquest of the Arctic. To Western Europeans during World Wars I and II, particularly the French, it symbolized the American willingness to fight for freedom. To American seamen or servicemen in Iwo Jima, and to millions of Americans at home, the mere photograph of our fighting men raising the flag on Mount Suribachi symbolized American pride in our flag and our country. And to Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, planting our flag on the moon symbolized the technical achievement of a nation which went to the moon for the benefit of all mankind. The Stars and Stripes are flown aboard every American warship and merchantman alike. Thus, this symbol of the United States can be seen in any ocean or any navigable waterway of the world at any time. Today in the Persian Gulf, our flag symbolizes our willingness to fight aggression and our desire to live in a world free of tyranny. The Stars and Stripes have stood for the character and personality of the United States throughout its history. Wherever the flag goes, in a parade along a city street, into space, at a sporting event, on a ship or submarine, or into battle, it stands for this nation and for the people who love and respect it. During the 1890s, President Benjamin Harrison once said, and I quote, "God pity the American citizen who does not love the flag, who does not see in it the story of our great free institutions and the hope of the home as well as the nation," unquote. And now will you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Sam Saylor.
Good morning. Thank you, Lord, for the weather. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, on behalf of the Destroyer Escort Sailors Association, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this dedication, the dedication ceremony honoring the Destroyer Escort Ship and Sailor. As you know, the Navy Memorial was created in honor of those who served to forge the heritage of the United States Navy, in tribute to those who perished to provide peace and security for our maritime nation, and in gratitude to those now serving. The destroyer escort was a unique vessel. It played a brief but major role in wars and skirmishes in U.S. naval history. As such, it is truly fitting that a permanent sculpture be placed here at the Navy Memorial. It will be a constant reminder to those who will visit the memorial. It is now my privilege and honor to introduce to you our Master of Ceremonies for today's event, my good friend from Oklahoma, Dr. James H. Warren. Jim has been a chemist, a professor, a businessman, a political organizer, a development economist, and a diplomat. But he credits his DE service aboard the USS William C. Cole as his first introduction to the world of bureaucracy. Today, he devotes most of his time and energy as a professional humorist and is president of the American Association of Bureaucrats. Jim Warren, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Sam. I have not come here today, however, as a humorist or as the president of the Bureaucrats Association, which believes in doing nothing but doing it with style. We believe when in doubt, mumble has been the way of the bureaucrats. But today I am particularly honored to be with you and with my distinguished guests, our distinguished guests, the fellow comrades of the United States Navy, the ladies of the auxiliary, to serve as your Master of Ceremonies as we honor the destroyer escort, those valiant ships and the men who serve them. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you, direct from his native Birmingham, Alabama, our guest speaker, John A. Williamson. John Williamson was the heroic captain of the USS England. This was the ship, as you may remember, which in the spring of 1944 sank 6 submarines in 12 days. That great ship, its officers and crew played a major role in the victory in the Philippine Sea and during the other battles of World War II. The men of the USS England received the Presidential Unit Citation for their gallant work. Captain Williamson earned and received the Legion of Merit for combat and the Silver Star. Please join me in welcoming John A. Williamson.
Thank you, Jim, for that fine introduction, and I appreciate it very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and honored guests. Let's try that again. Now, you know we're DE sailors, and we know how to say good morning, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go. That's the way to do it. You know, that's a very special occasion for all of us that served on DEs and had the honor to sail and serve in the DE Navy. And I'm honored to be here at this time and on this occasion. To truly honor the DE ship and sailor, we must remember to discuss some of the things which makes a DE ship and sailor a hallowed memory for all of us. So, ladies and gentlemen, and honored guests, let me take you back for a little bit in time. The time is 0648. The date is October the 25th, 1944, off the island of Samar in the Philippines. Taffy 3, Admiral Clifton Sprague's air support group of 6 CVEs, which you remember was the light carriers, 3 destroyers and 4 destroyer escorts, have just launched routine patrols and are settling down to breakfast when one of the lookouts spots some anti-aircraft fire to the north. Seconds later, the distinctive tall mast of Japanese battleships and cruisers appear. This turns out to be Admiral Kurita's center force, consisting of 6 battleships, which includes the super battleship Yamata, 8 cruisers, and 12 destroyers. It's a total of 26 Japanese ships, the Navy ships, the best ships of the Japanese line. Any doubts about the identification of the intruders are dispelled when the Japanese open fire. Cranking on flank speed, which is a pathetic 17.5 knots, and faced by the ultimate desperate circumstances, Admiral Sprague at 0716 orders his wolves, that is his 3 destroyers, to torpedo attack. Dashing in to launch their fish at close range, Destroyer Johnson takes 3 14-inch hits, each shell weighs over a ton, and 3 6-inch, goes dead in the water, rolls over and sinks. Hull takes 40 hits, so including some 16 inches, and she sinks. Herman launches 6 torpedoes at Yamata, which then turns and takes her 18-inch guns out of the fray for the moment. In 0742, with his desperate circumstances even more desperate, Admiral Sprague then orders his Little Wolves, that is the last of his protecting force, which is the 4 little destroyer escorts, consisting of the DEs Raymond, Butler, Dennis, and Samuel B. Roberts, and he asks them to go make an attack and throw themselves into the fray. Dennis takes 3 hits, launches 3 torpedoes, scores some 5 hits on a Jap cruiser and escapes. Roberts, closing into the point-blank range of 4,000 yards, launches her torpedoes, but is hit by several 14 inches. While with a 40-foot hole in her side, all power lost and the ship in shambles, the men on number 2 gun continue to fire at the Japanese fleet. They get off 6 rounds before the 7th round finally explodes, killing most of the crew. At 09:10, the blazing hulk of the Roberts sinks into the bottom of the sea with 3 officers and 86 men killed, that either were killed in battle or died at sea because they were not picked up for 48 hours. The charge of the Light Brigade, which accomplished nothing, was made immortal by a poet. The charge of the Wolves and the Little Wolves, which accomplished a great deal because it bought time and it helped by its impetuosity to convince Kurita that he had bitten off more than he could chew, had them turn and run. But so they have not found a poet to make them famous. But the tribute of the commanding officer of Samuel B. Roberts to his crew not only has eloquence of its own, but it helps us to define and describe the DE sailor. Here are the words of Lieutenant Commander R.W. Copeland, USNR, and I'd like to quote. He said, "To witness the conduct of the average enlisted man on board this vessel, with an average of less than 1 year's service, would make any man proud to be an American. The crew was informed at the beginning of the action by the commanding officer and his estimate of the situation. That is, this is a fight against overwhelming odds from which survival cannot be expected, during which time we would do what damage we could. In the face of this knowledge, the men zealously manned their stations, fought and worked with such calmness, courage, and efficiency that no higher honor could be conceived than to command such a group." Unquote. This moment in one of the greatest naval battles of history was a high moment in the annals of the United States Navy and indeed of the United States of America. But the description of the DE sailor contained in Commander Copeland's tribute could be applied to destroyer escort men in other moments, in other situations, at other times and places. Which is to say that the DE sailor was a young American with limited experience, limited service, and limited seagoing, who, when called upon to serve, fought and worked with such calmness, courage, and efficiency as to exceed all reasonable expectations. New men in new ships. This is what the DE sailor was, and he was set apart, a new breed in the naval service. The destroyer escort was designed to meet an urgent need for convoy protection and for anti-submarine activities of all kinds. Smaller, slower, and less heavily armed than destroyers, the DE could be produced quickly at less cost. 250 DEs were authorized in January of 1942, but by December of 1943, 260 had already been commissioned. Only 22 months later. They were officered and manned primarily by reservists, and every vessel that went into commission represented a triumph of improvisation by inexperienced men sweating under pressure to learn what they were doing, where they were going, and how to put it all together to make things work. And in the learning process, they intensified once these ships put to sea. There was a famous phrase that I'm sure most of you remember from the King Mutiny that said the U.S. Navy is a system designed by geniuses to be executed by idiots. Well, nothing could be farther from the truth. The truth was that these new ships were sailed and fought by men with a capacity to learn and ability to make things work that had all the earmarks of genius. If their courage under fire merited admiration, their ability to fight and work with calmness and efficiency was even more deserving of comment. Samuel Morrison, who's a well-known naval historian of World War II, said that the USS England was an outstanding example of efficiency when in May 1944, this destroyer escort, just 12 weeks after shakedown, or with just 12 weeks of sea experience, established an all-time record by sinking 6 submarines in 12 days. Now, I cannot comment too much on the England because you might accuse me of favoritism, but it was my good fortune to be the commanding officer of those attacks, on those 6 killing attacks, and I wasn't proud of that. However, as you know, the conning officer is only a small part of a submarine sinking team. They are vital members of the submarine attack team, and any team member who fails to do his part, you miss the mark. please let me say that the England did have a pretty good team. Also, I must give credit in this operation to the George and the Rabian and later the Spangler, because they were instrumental in original contact on some of these submarines and also instrumental in maintaining contact between times that we were able to sink the submarines. Over in the Atlantic, anti-submarine warfare was the #1 priority, and the DEs were the key players. While screening Block Island en route to the Cape Verde Islands one night, DE Thomas sank one submarine, the DE Bronstein sank 2 submarines that night and damaged another one so severely that when she got back to the submarine pins, they scrapped it. 2 weeks later, the DE Bronstein sank another submarine, which gives them credit for 4 submarines. That was commanded by Lieutenant Commander Sheldon Kinney, who is here with us today. And in a real swashbuckling episode, Buckley closed and rammed U-66. They then repelled boarders with small arms fire, shell cases, coffee cups, knives, and bare fists, and finally the U-boat sprayed clear and sank. Later in May, the USS U-549 sank the Block Island, but Eugene E. Elmore promptly sank U-549. On 9 May, D.E. Leopold was sunk with a huge loss in crew. 171 out of 199 Coast Guardsmen lost their lives in the Leopold sinking. In June, in another unprecedented feat, Chatelain and the Guadalcanal Hunter Killer Group jet depth charge U-505. She was so badly damaged by depth charges that she had to surface, and the Pillsbury sent over a boarding party and captured the U-505 and towed it back, and it's a museum ship. Destroyer escorts were also active in the Mediterranean, where Thecla was sunk by U-967 east of Gibraltar in May, and DEs were well represented on DE Day, where the Rich, among others, was sunk by mines off Omaha Beach. Back in the Pacific in 1944, Eversole was sunk by 2 torpedoes from I-45. This occurred at 0230. At 0645, I-45 was sunk by a well-placed salvo of Hedgehogs from the Whitehurst. On February 26, 1945, Finnegan sank I-370 off Iwo Jima. And in April, off Okinawa, destroyer escorts began sharing the long ordeal inflicted by kamikazes in a seemingly innocent, endless attacks that actually numbered in the thousands of suicide planes. Weston was the first to catch it on April 7th, followed by Samuel S. Miles on the 10th. On April the 12th, the Raw was kamikaded with a loss of 21 killed, 38 wounded. Whitehurst was hit with 37 killed and 27 wounded, and Riddle suffered 1 killed and 7 wounded. Okinawa was a tragic time for both destroyer escorts and destroyers, because several divisions and DEs were actually decimated during the Okinawa campaign. As a matter of fact, of the ships in our escort division 40, there were 5 of us at Okinawa, and all 5 of us were knocked out by suicide planes. We were the 5th in our division to get hit, and we were hit on May the 9th, which was VE Day, because it was May the 8th back here, but May the 9th out there. And we were hit, and we had lost 35 killed and 37 wounded. That same day that we were hit, the Oberenda, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Sam Spencer, was also hit. They towed her into Karamaretto, and she was so badly damaged they decided to scrap her. Later, the USS Dole, commanded by Lieutenant Graham Plater, found the survivors of the cruise Indianapolis. The cruise Indianapolis had delivered the atomic bomb to Iwo Jima and was en route to the Philippines, but she was sunk by a couple of torpedoes from the Jap sub. The people were in the water for several days before the Oberenda finally found them. In the last month of the war, on July the 16th, Lawrence C. Taylor sank I-13, but the same day, Underhill was sunk by unidentified Japanese submarines. Well, this is a brief account, really, of DE actions and incidents, which leaves out more than it includes. It serves only to show that destroyer escorts and their appearance on the scene in significant numbers served in every theater of war and combat, participated in every major campaign of World War II in 1944 and 45. In their participation, they made a clear and valuable service to victory and a visible contribution, and they paid a price, a bitter price in some instances, if you've heard. But in paying just tribute to some of the more notable experiences and the more outstanding accomplishments of the new breed of ship and men, we cannot lose sight of the fact that these experiences were by definition unusual. And we would be remiss indeed if we failed to pay equal tribute to the usual, the unnoted, the unremarked, and unrecognized experiences of the VE sailor. That young American, when called upon to fight and die, fought well and died well. But the high blazing moments came and went, or came not at all. And what remained were the long, dull, drab, endless moments that made war, in Oliver Wendell Holmes' words, an organized bore. What with perhaps a difference. It was sometimes a deadly bore, demanding unremitting effort and constant vigilance with long hours, little sleep, no relaxation of mind and body for days, weeks, and sometimes months on end. To those who have not experienced it, even a deadly taxing bore may seem more like less of a fearsome thing. Only those who have tasted the last uttermost dismal dregs of fatigue, to the point where they would gladly give all they own, all they ever hoped to own, for a few hours, few precious hours of undisturbed and unvigilant sleep and rest, can know what I mean. My tribute to the D sailor goes beyond the unusual to the uncommon strength and fortitude and determination that it took to serve vigilantly and effectively, and determination that it took to serve through the weary, draining days and weeks and months, for however long it took to do the job and to see it through to the end. Someone once said that luck occurs when preparedness meets opportunity. Many DE sailors sail the seas pinging away for hours, days, and weeks on end without ever contacting a submarine. With radars going and lookouts aloft, they never had a chance to shoot an enemy plane or ship. Were they less vigilant, less ready, or less prepared? I don't think so. They just never had that part of luck we call opportunity. Yes, the DE sailor fought well and he died well. He also endured. What he had to do, he did. What he had to endure, he endured. For his courage and dedication, I salute him. For his endurance, his patient and devoted service under the most trying conditions, let me add a final and affectionate salute. For those DE sailors who left us long ago, and for those who have a journey yet to make, I would close with a gentle benediction. God bless the DE sailor. Thank you very much.
That powerful message was matched only by the effective, inspiring leadership that he gave to the USS England. And though we may not have our poet yet, there is another thing that we may be focusing on in this next 12 months. After conversation with President Saylor, we will be launching with the United States Postal Service as our target and effort to get that DE stamp. And we're going to get it in this next 12 months. If Mickey Mouse can have a stamp, certainly the destroyer escort ships and sailors can have a stamp. It is now my privilege to introduce to you the nation's second highest ranking military officer, a great man, a compassionate man, an effective leader, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and a destroyer escort sailor, Admiral David E. Jeremiah. Admiral.
It's very warming to be here and to see so many DE sailors. Connie and I owe a great deal of, we have a great sympathy with and empathy with the DE sailors, because the last time I saw this group or parts of this group was in Seattle, Washington at a convention on the day that I discovered that it was announced that I would be the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet. So we tie those two events together quite nicely. I think that anyone who follows John Williams to a podium can only offer an exclamation point to his remarks. And I can also say that I find myself in great jeopardy at this podium behind John, first as a speaker, but also as a great admirer for his performance, both as an American and a great destroyer escort skipper. Now, he talked about those young Americans who went to sea in destroyer escorts. They are you. And I was reminded as he was talking about their experience and background of a quote attributed to Samuel Johnson to his admirer Boswell. Johnson said that being in a ship is being in jail with the chance of being drowned. And I can't help but think most of us felt that way the first time we walked aboard and saw our ship. I felt the same way. My DE experience, I think I'd like to talk to you about, it came in three pieces. The first was as a brand new junior officer on board USS Charles E. Brannan, named for a young torpedo bomber pilot who lost his life in the Battle of Midway. I walked aboard and I was greeted at the quarterdeck by two of the biggest bosun mates chiefs I've ever seen in my life, and they promptly took me in hand and molded me and taught me the ways and habits of sailors. And in that context and on that ship, I developed a real love affair with these very nimble ships that go in harm's way. That ship grounded me in my experience with sailors, with the sea, and my responsibilities as an officer. At the same time, I met an individual who will become part of what I'll describe later as the third phase of my experience with destroyer escorts. The second phase of my experience with destroyer escorts was as a young lieutenant, recalled as a reservist in 1961, just as the reserves who have been recalled today to serve in the Gulf. At that time, we were called up for the Berlin crisis, and today they are called up for the events that go on in the Gulf in Operation Desert Shield. There were a large group of us, naval reservists, called up as units in the selected reserve. Whitehurst was a sister ship of mine in Seattle. We went to the Far East. Bronstein's a familiar name, as is Silverstein, and all the rest of them that I see around here today. I served on USS McGinney, DE 365. Like all reservists and like all DEs, we went where we were needed, not to Berlin, but to Vietnam. And there we began under a surveillance operation to interdict the shipping that is going into Vietnam, just as today's sailors are interdicting the shipping that goes to Kuwait and Iraq. That operation was later called Marketime, and it is one in which Admiral Gravely, I believe, subsequently participated in command of combat. My third experience, and the one I want to spend a little time on with you, is the totality of my experience in destroyer escorts. It began, as I said, as an ensign, walking aboard my first ship, a thrill in and of itself. It continues today as the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff as I look at groups like this around the nation who recognize the price of freedom and democracy. And it culminates, therefore, in many ways in this ceremony that marks the lives and the ships that have served this nation. But it began also as a junior officer when I read and was thrilled by the description of the bravery and audacity of sailors in the Battle off Samar that you've heard John Williamson talk about in that book called Destroyer Operations in World War II. A thrilling book, and I was thrilled to discover after about a year on board that I would serve under the command of Bob Copeland, the commanding officer of the Samuel B. Roberts, as a reserve unit squadron commander during active duty training when he took our ships off to Panama. I spent a number of nights sitting literally at his knee listening to his descriptions of the intimate events that took place during that battle, the personal kinds of things that we don't need to share today, but we all have in our minds, of those individual sailors and their experiences both on the ship and in the water as they sorted out principles and values and gave their lives in many instances for freedom in this country. And I watched through the course of my naval career the growth of this organization of destroyer escorts